The gunshot missed Elara's head by 3 inches. She felt the heat of the bullet pass her ear, heard the crack as it buried itself in mahogany paneling behind her, and in that frozen moment between alive and dead, she realized 2 things. First, Malta had been planning to kill her all along. Second, Cassian Thorne was going to wake up and find her body next to his bed, and somehow that felt worse than dying. The bronze bust left her hands before conscious thought caught up with survival instinct, spinning through the air in the red emergency lighting, and when it connected with Malta's skull, the sound was wet and final. The gun clattered to the floor. Malta staggered, and Bianca, standing in the shadows with a knife that caught the light like a promise, started laughing. "You stupid girl." Bianca's voice was silk wrapped around razor blades. "Did you really think throwing a statue would save you? Did you think the Prince of Ash would wake up in time to be your hero?" But Cassian was already moving. The drugged sleep that should have kept him unconscious for hours shattered like glass as his body recognized danger the way some people recognize their own names. He rolled off the bed in one fluid motion, bare-chested and lethal, and his hand closed around Malta's throat before the man could recover his weapon. The sound Malta made wasn't human. It was the sound of someone realizing they'd miscalculated badly, that loyalty bought with money was no match for loyalty earned through blood. Cassian's voice came out low and cold, the kind of cold that burned. "You have 3 seconds to tell me who bought you before I start removing pieces." The estate's security flooded the room, automatic weapons raised, red laser sights painting dots across Malta's chest like a constellation of death. Bianca tried to run, but 2 guards caught her before she made it 3 steps, slamming her against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. Her knife clattered across marble floors that had probably seen violence like this before, that had been designed to clean up blood without staining. Cassian didn't look at Bianca. He didn't look at Malta. His eyes found Elara, standing there in pajamas she'd borrowed from his closet, her hands shaking, her face pale, and something in his expression cracked open. "Are you hurt?" Elara shook her head because words had stopped working. Her ears rang from the gunshot. Her hands felt disconnected from her body. She'd just thrown a 15-pound bronze sculpture at a trained killer, and somehow, impossibly, it had worked. Cassian released Malta, letting the man crumple to the floor where guards zip-tied his wrists with efficient brutality. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides and pulled Elara against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other pressed against her spine like he was checking to make sure she was real and whole and breathing. "You saved my life." His voice rumbled through his chest into hers. "Against every instinct that should have told you to run, you came back for me." "I didn't think." Elara's voice came out muffled against his skin. "I just moved." "That's called courage." Cassian pulled back just enough to look at her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Malta's been with me for 8 years. I trusted him with everything, and you saw through him in a week." Behind them, Bianca was screaming threats and promises, her voice shrill and desperate. Cassian made a gesture with 2 fingers, and one of the guards gagged her with professional efficiency. The sudden silence was almost worse than the noise. "Get them out of here." Cassian's voice shifted back to command mode, the brief moment of vulnerability closing up like a wound. "I want Malta alive for questioning. The woman can go to the Hartley family with a message. Tell them their coup failed, and if they try again, I won't be diplomatic." The guards hauled Malta and Bianca away, leaving bloodstains and broken furniture and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Cassian released Elara slowly, like he wasn't quite ready to let go but knew he had to. He walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the glass, and for the first time since she'd met him, looked like what he actually was. A a 32-year-old man who'd been carrying the weight of an empire since he was 19, who'd just discovered his most trusted ally had been planning to put a bullet in his brain. "How long have you known?" Elara asked quietly. "Known what?" "That Malta was working for them." Cassian was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't know. Not for certain. I suspected something was wrong 3 days ago when he kept pushing me to increase my medication dosage, said it would help with the pain from the convoy attack. But suspecting and knowing are different things." He turned to face her. "You found proof, didn't you?" Elara nodded. "I found a radio hidden in the kitchen pantry yesterday. Heard him talking to someone about timing, about making sure the estate's security systems would have a blind spot at 2 a.m. I didn't know who else to trust, so I came to warn you myself." "You could have run." Cassian crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "Could have taken the opening to escape while everyone was distracted." "And go where?" Elara met his eyes steadily. "You kept your promise about Julian. His surgery was successful. He's recovering in the best cardiac unit in the country with round-the-clock care I could never afford in 3 lifetimes. Running would make me exactly like Bianca, someone who takes and gives nothing back. That's not how this works." Cassian's jaw tightened. "I bought you, Elara. Bought your debt. Bought your loyalty. Bought a year of your life. You don't owe me gratitude for keeping a contract. You didn't buy me." Elara's voice came out sharper than she intended. "You gave me a choice when I had none. There's a difference." Before Cassian could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and something in his expression shifted. "It's Julian. He's asking for you." But 3 hours passed before Elara actually got the call patched through. 3 hours of Cassian's lawyers arriving with documents, of federal agents somehow appearing despite the early hour, of evidence being presented in neat folders that made Malta's betrayal look like an organized conspiracy rather than a simple murder attempt. By the time Elara's phone finally rang with a video call from the hospital, dawn was breaking over the Atlantic in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene given everything that had just happened. Julian's face filled the screen, pale but smiling, oxygen tubes gone from his nose for the first time in 2 years. "Elara, guess what? The doctors said the new heart is working perfectly. They said I might be able to go home in 2 weeks. Real home, not hospital home." Elara's throat closed up. She blinked hard against tears that wanted to fall. "That's amazing, Jules. I'm so proud of you." "The doctor said someone paid for experimental anti-rejection drugs that aren't even approved yet, the kind they use in Europe. Said it'll basically guarantee my body won't reject the transplant." "Was that you?" Elara glanced at Cassian, who was standing across the room pretending not to listen while he scrolled through his tablet. "That was a friend." "You have friends who can afford experimental European drugs?" Julian's eyes went wide. "Elara, what kind of job are you actually doing?" "The kind that pays well." Elara forced a smile. "Don't worry about it. Just focus on getting better, okay?" They talked for another 10 minutes about nothing important, about the terrible hospital food and the nice nurse who snuck him extra pudding and the physical therapy exercises that were boring but necessary. Normal things. Safe things. The kind of conversation Elara had dreamed about having during all those months when every discussion involved ventilators and transplant lists and odds of survival. When she finally hung up, Cassian was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You didn't tell him?" "Tell him what?" "That you're engaged to the Prince of Ash? That you're living in a fortress on a cliff? That you almost died tonight protecting a man you've known for exactly 9 days?" What would I even say? Elara set down her phone. "Hey, Julian, remember how I disappeared for a week? Turns out I sold myself to a crime lord to pay for your heart transplant. Don't worry though, it's totally fine. He only expects me to pretend to be in love with him for public appearances. Is that what you think this is? Cassian's voice dropped lower. Pretending? Isn't it? Come here. It wasn't a request. Elara crossed the room slowly, her bare feet silent on marble floors. Cassian set down his tablet and turned to face her fully, his expression serious. I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. The contract we signed 9 days ago is void as of 4 hours ago when Julian's surgery was completed successfully. You fulfilled your end by showing up to one gala and not running away. I fulfilled mine by saving your brother's life. We're even. You're free to go. Elara stared at him. What? I've set up a trust fund in Julian's name. $5 million managed by an independent firm, untouchable by me or anyone associated with my businesses. It'll pay for his medical care, his education, housing, everything he needs until he's 30. I've arranged for an apartment in a safe neighborhood, prepaid for 5 years, utilities included. You never have to see me again if you don't want to. The words landed like physical blows. Elara tried to process what he was saying, tried to understand why it felt like the floor was dropping out from under her. You're dismissing me? I'm freeing you. Cassian's expression didn't change. There's a difference. After I just saved your life, after Malta tried to kill us both, after everything that happened tonight, you're just going to send me away? It's not safe here. Cassian's jaw tightened. Tonight proved that. Malta wasn't working alone. He had help from inside my organization, people I trusted, people who've been with the Thorne family for years. Until I root out every traitor, everyone around me is a target. I won't make you a target, Elara. I won't let you die because you happened to be convenient when I needed a fake fiancé. So that's it. Elara felt something cold and hard settling in her chest. You got what you needed from me. The federal audit is satisfied, and now I'm a liability you need to dispose of. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. Elara turned away, her hands clenched into fists. You know what the worst part is? For about 5 minutes tonight, when you looked at me after Malta missed his shot, I actually thought maybe this was becoming real. That maybe the contract was just an excuse and you actually gave a damn. Elara, don't. She held up one hand, not trusting herself to look at him. Just don't. You're right. The contract is fulfilled. I'll pack my things and be gone by noon. She made it 3 steps toward the door before Cassian moved. His hand caught her wrist, not hard, but firm enough to stop her. When she tried to pull away, his other arm came around her waist, turning her to face him. Let me go. No. Cassian's voice was rough. Not until you hear what I'm actually trying to say. I heard you perfectly. You want me gone because I'm a complication you don't need. I want you safe. Cassian's eyes burned into hers. I want you away from this world where people get shot at 2 a.m. I want your brother to grow up without looking over his shoulder, wondering if his sister's fiancé's enemies are going to use him for leverage. I want you to have the normal life you deserve, instead of being trapped in a fortress with a man who has more enemies than friends. And what if I don't want normal? The words came out before Elara could stop them. What if I've spent my whole life being invisible and disposable, and I'm tired of it? What if for the first time someone actually sees me and I don't want to go back to being a ghost? Cassian went very still. What are you saying? I'm saying I choose to stay. Elara's voice shook, but she didn't look away. Not because of the contract. Not because I owe you. Because I want to. The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Outside, the sun was rising over the Atlantic, throwing golden light across a room that still smelled like gunpowder and fear. Somewhere in the estate, guards were changing shifts. Staff was beginning morning routines. The world was moving forward like it always did, like people didn't almost die in the middle of the night. You don't know what you're asking for. Cassian's voice was barely above a whisper. This life, this world, it destroys everything soft and good. I've seen it happen 100 times. Then I guess I'll have to be harder than I look. Elara reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. You gave me a choice, Cassian, and I'm choosing you. Something broke in Cassian's expression. His hand came up to cover hers, pressing it against his cheek. If you stay, it has to be real. No more pretending, no more contracts. Just you and me, figuring this out. Just you and me, Elara repeated. And Cassian Thorne, the Prince of Ash, the man who controlled ports and unions and shadows, pulled her close and kissed her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to kill him. If this story is pulling you in, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. The next part is going to change everything. Drop a comment and tell us what you think Elara should do next. Should she really trust Cassian? What secrets is he still hiding? Your engagement keeps these stories coming. So smash that subscribe button and let's build this community together. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Elara moved from the guest suite to Cassian's private wing, not because he demanded it, but because waking up alone after the Malta incident left her staring at shadows and jumping at every sound. Cassian never pushed for more than she was ready to give, but his presence became a constant. His hand at the small of her back during dinner, his voice on the phone when she called Julian for their daily check-ins, his body next to hers at night, a solid warmth that made sleep possible again. The federal audit closed with findings that cleared the Thorne shipping operations of any wrongdoing. The media ate up the story of the crime lord who'd fallen for a Brooklyn waitress, spinning it as a modern fairy tale. Cassian's approval ratings, such as they were for a man who technically didn't exist in any official capacity, soared among the city's elite, who preferred their criminals charming rather than terrifying. But Elara was learning that life with Cassian Thorne meant living in layers. The public layer was champagne galas and designer gowns and smiling for cameras. The private layer was strategic meetings in soundproof rooms and coded phone calls at 3 in the morning. And underneath it all ran a current of violence that never quite went away, just shifted and adapted and waited for the next opening. She was reading in the library when Cassian found her 3 weeks after the Malta incident. He looked different, tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep. He sat down across from her without speaking, and Elara set down her book. What happened? The Hartley family made another move. Not against me this time. Against Julian. Elara's blood went cold. What kind of move? They tried to bribe his surgical team to file a false report claiming organ rejection? Would have forced an emergency intervention that wasn't medically necessary. Could have killed him or damaged the transplant. Cassian's hands clenched on the arms of his chair. They wanted leverage. Wanted to prove they could still hurt me through the people I care about. But they didn't succeed. Elara's voice came out flat, statement, not question. The head surgeon is on my payroll and has been for years. He reported the bribe attempt immediately. But it's a message, Elara. They're telling me that as long as you and Julian exist, they have targets. So what are you saying? That I should leave after all? Take Julian and disappear? I'm saying I'm done being defensive. Cassian met her eyes and she saw something dangerous there. something that reminded her exactly who he was underneath the tailored suits and careful charm. I've been playing nice because of the federal audit, because I needed to maintain appearances. That's over now. Tomorrow, I'm ending the Hartley family's involvement in this city permanently. Permanently as in they'll wake up to find their assets frozen, their political connections severed, and their key people facing indictments for crimes they absolutely committed but thought they'd buried deep enough. Cassian's voice was cold. I won't kill them. I'm not a barbarian despite what the tabloids say. But I will destroy them so thoroughly that 3 generations from now people will still use their name as a warning about what happens when you threaten a thorn. Elara should have been horrified, should have been frightened by the casual way he discussed ruining entire family lines. Instead, she felt something warm unfurl in her chest. You're doing this because of Julian. I'm doing this because they miscalculated. They thought you were just a contract, just a convenient prop. They didn't realize you'd become the one thing in my world that actually matters. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them had quite voiced before. Elara set down her book completely. Say that again. Which part? The part where I matter. Cassian stood up, crossed the space between them, and knelt in front of her chair so they were eye level. When I bought your debt, it was purely transactional. I needed someone who looked innocent, and you needed money for your brother. Simple exchange. But you didn't stay simple, Elara. You learned the names of my entire household staff. You asked Elena about her grandchildren. You convinced my head of security to smile, and I've known Marcus for 15 years and never seen him smile. You walked into a life-threatening situation to save me when every instinct should have told you to run. And somewhere between the contract and now, you stopped being a prop and became the reason I wake up in the morning. I'm just a waitress from Brooklyn. Elara's voice came out softer than she intended. You're a woman who worked 80-hour weeks to save her brother, who learned advanced cardiac care from YouTube videos because you couldn't afford nurses, who threw a bronze bust at a trained killer without hesitation. Cassian's hand found hers. You're not just anything, Elara. You're extraordinary, and you've been invisible for so long, you forgot. She kissed him then, pulling him up from his knees, feeling him respond with an intensity that made her forget about Hartley families and federal audits and everything except the solid warmth of him against her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cassian rested his forehead against hers. Come with me tomorrow. I want you to see what I'm actually like when I stop pretending to be civilized. That's either the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, or the most terrifying. Elara smiled against his mouth. I'm not sure which. Can it be both? With you? Probably. The next morning, Elara found herself in the back of an armored SUV watching Cassian orchestrate the systematic destruction of the Hartley Empire. It happened in conference rooms and law offices, in banks and political chambers, executed with surgical precision by teams of lawyers and accountants and federal agents who'd been waiting years for enough evidence to move. Cassian made phone calls that ended political careers, signed documents that transferred assets, spoke in quiet tones that made grown men go pale. And through it all, he kept one hand linked with Elara's, like she was the anchor keeping him human. By sunset, the Hartley family had been reduced from one of the city's most powerful criminal organizations to a cautionary tale. Their legitimate businesses were under investigation. Their illegitimate ones had been absorbed by Thorne operations. Their political allies had publicly disavowed them. And the patriarch, A man who'd ruled the Harbor District for 30 years was facing federal racketeering charges that would put him away for life. Cassian's phone rang as they drove back to the estate. He listened for a moment, his expression unreadable. Understood. Make sure he gets the message. He hung up and turned to Elara. The Hartley patriarch wants to negotiate, offering complete surrender in exchange for leniency for his grandchildren. What will you do? Let him surrender. Spare the grandchildren. They're 8 and 10 years old, Elara. They didn't choose this life. He was quiet for a moment. You would have asked me to spare them even if he hadn't, wouldn't you? Probably. That's what I thought. Cassian squeezed her hand. See what you've done? A year ago, I would have crushed all of them without blinking. Now I'm showing mercy because a waitress from Brooklyn believes people deserve second chances. Is that a bad thing? It's terrifying. Cassian smiled, but his eyes were serious. You make me want to be better than I am. Make me think maybe the Prince of Ash could be something other than a monster. You were never a monster. Elara turned to face him fully. Monsters don't keep promises to dying boys. Monsters don't employ half the ex-convicts in the city because they believe in rehabilitation. Monsters don't set up anonymous scholarship funds for kids from the same neighborhoods they grew up in. You've been doing research on me. Elena talks when she's teaching me how to run a household this size. Elara shrugged. You're not as scary as you think you are, Cassian Thorne. Don't let that get around. I have a reputation to maintain. They arrived back at the estate as the sun set over the Atlantic in shades of orange and purple that looked painted on. Staff greeted them with quiet efficiency. Elena had dinner waiting in the private dining room, and for a moment everything felt almost normal. Almost like Elara hadn't spent the day watching a criminal empire crumble at the hands of the man she was falling in love with. After dinner, Cassian disappeared into his office for what he said would be a quick call. An hour passed, then 2. Elara wandered through the estate, ending up in the conservatory where floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the ocean. She was watching the waves crash against the rocks below when she heard footsteps behind her. It wasn't Cassian. Hello, Elara. The voice was cultured, male, unfamiliar. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. She turned to find a man in his 50s, impeccably dressed, with cold eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Something about him made her skin crawl. Who are you? Vincent Thorne, Cassian's uncle. The man extended his hand, which Elara didn't take. I've been out of the country for the past month, just returned to discover my nephew has gotten himself engaged to a waitress. Quite the scandal. Cassian didn't mention you. Cassian and I have a complicated relationship. Vincent walked to the window, his movements casual but calculated. His father, my brother, left him the organization when he died. Left me nothing despite 30 years of service. You can imagine how that felt. If you're expecting sympathy, you're talking to the wrong person. Elara kept her voice level. I grew up with nothing. Cassian offered me a way to save my brother. Whatever family drama you're dealing with, it's not my problem. Oh, but it is your problem. Vincent turned to face her, and his smile had teeth. You see, I've spent the last month building a coalition. The Hartleys were my allies, not his. When Cassian destroyed them today, he declared war on me without even realizing it. Then you should probably take that up with Cassian. I intend to. But first, I wanted to meet the woman who's made my nephew weak. The woman who convinced the Prince of Ash that love matters more than power. Vincent took a step closer. Did you know that Malta was working for me? That the whole assassination attempt was designed to look like a Hartley operation when it was really about me taking what should have been mine? Elara's blood ran cold. You tried to have your own nephew killed. Family business is complicated. Vincent shrugged, and for what it's worth, I didn't want him dead. Just incapacitated enough that the board would declare him unfit and install me as interim leader. Malta was supposed to wound him, not kill him. But then you interfered, threw that ridiculous statue and ruined months of planning. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand what's coming. Vincent's eyes were flat and emotionless. When I take over the Thorne Empire, I'll be more merciful than Cassian was today. Your brother can keep his new heart. You can go back to your little Brooklyn life. All you have to do is walk away right now, tonight, before this gets messier. And if I don't, then you'll watch Cassian lose everything that matters to him. And you'll know it's because he chose you over survival. Vincent checked his watch. You have until midnight to decide. After that, the next move is mine. He left as silently as he'd arrived, and Elara stood there, shaking. She pulled out her phone to call Cassian, then stopped. He was meeting with his security team, planning next steps after the Hartley takedown. He didn't need this, not tonight. But if she didn't tell him, if Vincent made his move and Cassian wasn't prepared, the door opened again. This time it was Cassian, his expression concerned. Elena said she saw my uncle head this way. Did he find you? Elara made a decision. Yes. He introduced himself. That's all? That's all. The lie tasted bitter. He was very polite. Cassian's eyes narrowed. Elara, if he said something that made you uncomfortable. He didn't. I'm fine. Just tired. It's been a long day. She watched him accept the lie, watched him decide to trust her, and hated herself for it. But what was she supposed to say? That his own uncle was planning a coup? That she'd been given an ultimatum? That she was terrified of being the reason Cassian lost everything he'd built? They went to bed that night with the lie sitting between them like a physical presence. Cassian fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day. Elara lay awake, watching the clock tick toward midnight, wondering what Vincent's next move would be. She didn't have to wait long. At 11:45, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A photo. Julian's hospital room. Julian asleep in his bed. And standing next to him, visible in the corner of the frame, was a man in a black suit. The message that followed was simple. Such a miracle. A new heart at his age? Would be a shame if something went wrong with his medication. Elara was out of bed before conscious thought caught up. She grabbed clothes, her phone, keys to one of the estate cars she'd been given in case of emergency. This qualified. She'd drive to the hospital, get Julian, take him somewhere safe, figure out the rest later. She made it as far as the garage before Cassian's voice stopped her. Going somewhere? She turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, fully dressed, expression unreadable. I need to check on Julian. Got a text that something might be wrong. Show me the text. Elara hesitated, then held out her phone. Cassian read it, his jaw tightening. Vincent, how did you know? Because I've been waiting 15 years for him to make his move. Cassian pocketed her phone and pulled out his own. He made a call, brief and clipped. Julian's fine. I had a security detail on him the moment Vincent landed in the country. The man in that photo is one of mine, not Vincent's. You knew. Elara's voice came out flat. You knew your uncle was planning something and you didn't tell me. I knew he'd try something eventually. Didn't know the timeline. Cassian met her eyes. What did he say to you in the conservatory? That he was behind Malta? That the whole thing was a setup to make you look weak so he could take over? That I should walk away if I wanted Julian to stay safe? Elara's words came faster. And I lied to you about it because I was scared and stupid and thought I could handle it myself, and I'm sorry. Cassian was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something Elara didn't expect. He smiled. "You were trying to protect me. I was trying to not be the reason you lost everything." "Elara." He crossed the space between them, cupping her face in his hands. "You are the reason I have anything worth keeping. Vincent can take the empire, the ports, the money, all of it. But if he thinks threatening you or Julian will make me weak, he's forgotten who taught me to be ruthless in the first place. What are you going to do?" "End this. Tonight." Cassian kissed her forehead. "And you're coming with me because I'm done making decisions that leave you in the dark." 20 minutes later, Elara found herself back in the SUV, this time with a full security detail. They drove to a warehouse in the Harbor District, the kind of place where regular people didn't go after dark and smart people avoided entirely. Inside, the space was cavernous and cold, lit by industrial lights that threw harsh shadows. Vincent Thorne stood in the center with a dozen men in suits who looked like they'd kill without asking questions. He smiled when he saw Cassian. "Nephew, I was wondering when you'd figure it out. The moment you sent that text to Elara's phone." Cassian's voice was conversational, almost friendly. "You always did overplay your hand, Uncle. Could have waited, built a stronger coalition, moved when I was actually vulnerable. Instead, you got impatient. You destroyed the Hartleys. You think I was going to wait around for you to pick off my allies one by one?" Vincent gestured to his men. "Have got support from the union heads, the Port Authority, half your own security team. It's over, Cassian. Step down gracefully and I'll let you retire somewhere tropical." Cassian pulled out his phone and pressed a button. The industrial lights flickered, then stabilized. Around the warehouse, doors opened. Federal agents flooded in, weapons drawn, badges visible. And behind them, walking with perfect confidence, was a woman in her 60s wearing a prosecutor's badge. "Vincent Thorne, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and about 15 other charges that my office has been building for the past 3 years." The prosecutor's smile was shark-like. "Your nephew has been very helpful in providing evidence. Turns out when you try to kill someone, they're highly motivated to cooperate with law enforcement." Vincent's face went from confident to pale to purple in the span of 5 seconds. "You wore a wire. All this time, you were working with the feds. All this time, I was waiting for you to make your move so I could end this cleanly." Cassian's voice was cold. "You were right about one thing, Uncle. Family business is complicated. But it's a lot less complicated when the family member trying to kill you ends up in federal prison for the rest of his natural life." The agents moved in, zip-tying Vincent's men, reading Miranda rights. Vincent stared at Cassian with pure hatred. "She'll make you weak. That waitress will destroy everything Father built. Father built an empire on fear and violence." Cassian put his arm around Elara's waist. "I'm building something different. And if that makes me weak in your eyes, I'll take it." They arrested Vincent Thorne that night, along with 17 others in his organization. The news called it the largest organized crime bust in the city's history. The federal prosecutor held a press conference praising Cassian's cooperation and announcing that the Thorne family operations would be restructured under federal oversight to ensure legal compliance. And through it all, Cassian kept Elara close, like she was the thing that mattered most in a world that kept trying to pull him back into darkness. If you're still watching, you need to subscribe right now because what happens next will blow your mind. Hit that notification bell and drop a comment telling us what you think Cassian should do next. Is he really done with the criminal life? Can Elara trust this new version of him? Your comments fuel these stories, so engage with us and let's keep building this incredible community. 3 months passed. The federal oversight turned out to be less restrictive than expected, mostly focused on ensuring the port operations stayed clean and the union dealings remained above board. Cassian adapted with surprising ease, redirecting his strategic mind toward legitimate business expansion. The empire didn't shrink. It evolved. Elara watched him transform from the Prince of Ash into something that didn't have a convenient nickname. A businessman. A philanthropist. A man who still had edges sharp enough to cut, but who'd learned to choose when to use them. Julian came home from the hospital 6 weeks after the final surgery, healthy and energetic, and completely unaware of how close he'd come to being leverage in a war between criminals. Cassian set him up in a bedroom in the east wing of the estate, hired tutors to help him catch up on the schooling he'd missed, and somehow became the older brother Julian had never had. "You're good with him," Elara said one afternoon, watching through the window as Cassian taught Julian to throw a football on the lawn. "He reminds me of who I could have been if my father hadn't raised me to inherit an empire." Cassian appeared behind her, his arms coming around her waist. "Smart kid, quick learner. Terrible taste in football teams, but we're working on it. You bought him season tickets to the Jets. I'm teaching him about disappointment, character building." Elara laughed and turned in his arms. "You know he worships you, right? Thinks you're the coolest person alive? Wait until he's old enough to Google me. That'll cure him. Or it'll make you even cooler because teenage boys have terrible judgment." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for this, for giving him a safe place to heal. This is his home now, same as you." Cassian's expression grew serious. "Which brings me to something I've been thinking about. That's usually when you make decisions that change my entire life. Only the good ones." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Not the one he'd given her that first night in the Suve, but something different, smaller, more personal. "Cassian, we're already engaged." That was a contract. This is a choice. He opened the box to reveal a simple platinum band, elegant and understated, with an inscription on the inside that read, "Choose me." This is me asking you, Elara Vance, not as the Prince of Ash and not as part of any deal, but as a man who loves you more than he thought he was capable of loving anyone. If you'll marry me for real. Elara looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the life they'd built from the strangest foundation. "You're asking me to choose you every day for the rest of our lives." She took the ring and slid it onto her finger next to the contract ring she'd never taken off. "Then I guess I should tell you something too." "What's that?" "I've been choosing you since the night I threw that bronze bust at Malta. Everything after that was just me figuring out what my heart already knew." Cassian pulled her close and kissed her like she was the most valuable thing in an empire built on valuable things. Like she was the reason he'd survived long enough to become something better than the monster everyone expected. Like she was home. Outside, Julian whooped as he managed to throw the football in a perfect spiral for the first time. Inside, two people who'd started as a transaction discovered they'd somehow built something real. And somewhere in the spaces between contract and choice, between survival and love, they found the kind of happy ending that nobody plans for, but everyone hopes to find. 1 year later, Elara stood on a private beach in the Maldives watching Julian run through the surf with the kind of energy that came from a healthy heart and a future that stretched out endlessly in front of him. He was laughing. That pure, uninhibited sound of a 17-year-old who'd been given a second chance and intended to use every second of it. Cassian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. The man who'd been the Prince of Ash wore linen instead of suits these days, at least when they were here, away from the city and the businesses and the remnants of his old life. His empire had become a legitimate corporation. His enemies had either been imprisoned or absorbed into legal operations. His reputation had shifted from terrifying to simply respected. "You never did tell me." Elara leaned back against him, watching Julian dive under a wave and come up laughing. "That day in the library when you asked me to come with you to destroy the Hartley family? You said you wanted me to see what you were like when you stopped pretending to be civilized. And you were terrifying and efficient and absolutely certain, but you were also careful not to hurt anyone who didn't deserve it. You showed mercy when you could have shown cruelty. You weren't uncivilized, Cassian. You were just powerful. Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." Elara turned in his arms to face him. "You think you're a monster pretending to be a man? I think you're a man who spent so long surviving in a monstrous world that you forgot the difference." Cassian was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes searching hers. "You make me better than I am. I make you remember who you actually are. There's a difference." He kissed her then, soft and deep, tasting like salt air and the coffee they'd shared that morning and the life they were building together. When he pulled back, his expression had shifted to something almost nervous. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not freak out." That's never a good start to a conversation. "The prosecution's office called yesterday. They want me to testify before Congress about organized crime reform. Apparently, my unique perspective on transitioning criminal enterprises into legitimate businesses is valuable." Elara blinked. "They want the former Prince of Ash to testify before Congress?" I said the same thing, but apparently there's precedent. They're offering full immunity for anything I discuss, complete legal protection, and they're suggesting my testimony could lead to federal legislation that helps other families transition out of criminal operations. What did you tell them? That I needed to talk to my wife first. Cassian's hands settled on her hips. This would be public, Elara. No more hiding behind shell corporations and lawyers. My face on national television, my history exposed, everything. But it could help other families get out. Other kids who grew up like you did, trapped in a life they didn't choose. That's what I thought too. Cassian smiled slightly. See what you've done? Made me think I could actually change things instead of just surviving them. So when do we leave for Washington? We? You think I'm letting you walk into Congress alone? Elara raised an eyebrow. I threw a bronze bust at an armed killer for you, Cassian. I can handle some senators. They're arguably more dangerous than armed killers. Then I guess you'll need me there to protect you. 2 months later, Cassian Thorne sat before a congressional committee and told the truth about growing up in a family where business was conducted with bullets instead of contracts, about inheriting an empire at 19 when his father was murdered by rivals, about the choices he'd made to survive and the choices he'd made to change, about meeting a woman who'd reminded him that power without purpose was just violence dressed in expensive suits. The testimony took 3 days. The media coverage was intense. Public opinion split sharply between people who thought he was a reformed criminal trying to do good and people who thought once a monster, always a monster. But the legislation passed. Federal programs to help transition organized crime families into legitimate operations, legal protections for those who cooperated, resources for communities devastated by generational crime. And through it all, Elara sat in the gallery watching the man she'd married become something new. Not the Prince of Ash, not even Cassian Thorne, reformed criminal. Just Cassian. A man trying to be better than his past and finding that the trying mattered more than the past ever did. They flew back to the estate after the final day of testimony, both exhausted. and found Julian in the kitchen with Elena baking cookies like it was the most normal thing in the world. Like their family wasn't built from the strangest pieces. Like love wasn't supposed to make sense. It was just supposed to be real. "How'd it go?" Julian asked through a mouthful of chocolate chip cookie. "Your brother-in-law is probably going to end up in history books." Elara stole a cookie from the cooling rack. The good kind, not the kind they teach as cautionary tales. "That's cool, I guess." Julian shrugged with the perfect indifference of a 17-year-old. "Can I still tell people you're a reformed mob boss? Because that's way more interesting than businessman." "Kid's got a point." Cassian grabbed a cookie too. "Reformed mob boss has a certain ring to it." "You're both impossible." Elara looked at the two most important people in her world and felt something settle in her chest. Not happiness exactly, but something deeper. Contentment, maybe. The sense that she'd found the place she was supposed to be, even though getting there had required walking through fire. That night, alone in their bedroom, Cassian pulled Elara close and whispered against her hair. "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For saving me that first night. Not from Malta. From myself. From thinking power was the only thing that mattered." "You saved yourself." Elara traced patterns on his chest. "I just reminded you that you were worth saving." "Same thing. Not even close." They fell asleep, tangled together, and if Elara dreamed about marble floors and the crack of a slap that had changed everything, she didn't mention it. Some things were better left in the past, where they belonged. 6 months after that, Elara stood in a hospital room holding her newborn daughter, watching Cassian cradle the tiny human with the same careful intensity he brought to everything important. Julian sat in the corner, completely absorbed in his phone but glancing up every few minutes to make sure the baby was still breathing. "She has your eyes." Cassian's voice was soft, awed, dark, and way too smart for someone who's 30 minutes old. "She has your stubbornness." Already screaming when the nurses tried to measure her, Elara smiled tiredly. "Heaven help us when she's a teenager. We'll buy an island, raise her somewhere she can't cause too much trouble." "You bought an island last month." "Different island." Cassian looked up from his daughter's face. "Thank you for this, for all of it. You know you participated in the creation of this particular miracle, right? I mean, for taking a chance on a contract that should have just been business and turning it into a life. For choosing me when you could have walked away. For making me believe I could be something other than what I was raised to be." Elara reached out and touched his face, feeling the roughness of stubble, the warmth of skin, the realness of this man who'd started as her captor and become her partner. "You dropped to one knee and made a vow that wasn't about love, but somehow we found love anyway. Best contract I ever signed." Cassian leaned over and kissed her softly, carefully, mindful of the baby between them. "Even if you did renegotiate the terms, I'm an excellent negotiator. The best. And that, more than anything else, was the truth that mattered. Not the violence that had brought them together or the conspiracy that had tried to tear them apart. Not the empire or the testimony or the federal legislation. Just two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and chosen to stay. The vow Cassian had made that night when he'd knelt in front of Elara, bloodied and raw and terrifyingly human, hadn't been about love. It had been about freedom and choice and releasing her from obligations she'd never wanted. But in freeing her, he'd somehow freed himself. And the love had come after, built slowly and carefully. The kind of foundation that could support a life instead of just surviving one. Outside the hospital window, the city spread out in lights and shadows. The same city where a waitress had once been invisible and a crime lord had been untouchable. But that was a different story, one that belonged to different people. The people they'd been before a slap had echoed through a restaurant and changed everything. Elara looked at her husband holding their daughter, at her brother scrolling through his phone with the casual boredom of someone healthy enough to be bored, at the life they'd built from the most unlikely materials. And she thought about that first night in the SUV when Cassian had offered her a devil's bargain and she'd taken it because she'd had no other choice. She'd choose it again. Choose him. Choose this strange, complicated, beautiful life they'd made together. Choose love, even though it had never been part of the contract. Every single time. If this story moved you, subscribe and turn on notifications because we have more inspiring stories coming that will touch your heart and challenge everything you think you know about second chances and redemption. Drop a comment and share your thoughts. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice that turned out to be the best decision of your life? Your stories inspire us and inspire others who are watching, so don't hold back. Hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, and join this community of people who believe that love can grow in the strangest places and that everyone deserves a second chance to become who they were meant to be. See you in the next story.